Yep.
Cool.
So, welcome back to Roots and Resilience. And yeah, now we're going to have Rakesh sharing some of his ideas and experiments for low maintenance growing containers.
Okay, thank you. Um, to tell you the truth, I don't actually have a presentation ready at all. I've been teaching 5 days in a row, and I was teaching this morning, then had meetings literally right up till about 10 minutes ago. So I haven't actually prepared anything, but and it's a shame that I didn't catch most of Mark's talk, because it would have been nice to have just followed on from there. I guess where we can start though is we can build this up ourselves, and obviously I've done lots of different container gardening to forest gardening, indoor gardening, all kinds of different things. So I've got lots of tricks, and let's just see how we kind of evolve. Which ones we come up with to solve different problems. So I'm going to assume that that through Mark's presentation there are certain challenges that Mark and everyone else who has done container gardening has come up with. So let's see what are the different ways that we can start solving those. So what are those kind of challenges? What's some of the most difficult things that we find when we're trying to grow in containers, whether it's indoors or outdoors? But what's some of the biggest challenges we face? This is where you interact. You can unmute yourself and just speak.
Can I go?
Go for it.
So I guess one challenge was the watering.
Okay.
So probably have to be there like every day to water them and go away.
Okay, so watering.
We also spoke a lot about nutrition.
Nutrients. Yep. Oops. Okay, what else?
Situation.
Situation meaning?
As in, would that be the right situation or site for a particular plant? As in, have they got enough depth for roots?
Root depth. Okay. Yep, root depth. Anything else?
The microclimate that the pot is in.
Microclimate, good one. Okay, so all right, so let's think about it. What do plants need to really thrive? And when we're talking about plants, maybe we should also clarify what kind of plants we're talking about. Are we talking about perennials? Are we talking about annuals? Are we talking about biannuals? What's the difference? What's the difference between those three, first of all?
I know. Anyone else?
Anyone else? What is an annual?
Sorry, Sophie, I talked over the top of you.
Yeah, go on, Zoe.
I was just going to say how much of the year that they're actually productive and when they're dormant.
Almost. What is an annual? Let's look at that first. Technically, what is an annual plant?
One that grows once and then dies back, and you plant it again.
It dies.
So it does its full life cycle in 1 year. So it goes to seed, it fruits, etc., all the way through in just 1 year. Then you have to resow the following year.
Exactly. It dies at the end of the year. It dies at the end of the year. Now, what is a perennial then? Or actually, first of all, what is a biannual?
A biennial creates seed in its second year. Am I correct in that? So it takes 2 years to complete its full cycle.
Exactly.
And then dies.
As the name implies, it does its whole cycle in 2 years. So the first year, what's it doing in the first year? What's it trying to do? Imagine yourself, you want to
establish roots.
Yep. So imagine yourself, you want to you want to fruit. Your whole purpose is to give seed so that you can continue your life. You know, to give seed so that you've got more. You keep your genes going. So that's your priority. So in the first year, if you've got 2 years in which to do it, remember the hardest part of the lifetime of a plant is in fruiting and going to seed. It takes a lot of energy. So what are you doing, Naomi? I think you've got it already. What's it doing in the first year?
Establishing roots.
Establishing the roots and putting in lots of and holding on to lots of nutrients. It's building up a storage of carbohydrates, nutrients, sugars, typically in the form of either a tuber or a taproot. And so that the second year, now it can grow up and it can start shooting up and going to seed. So what is a perennial?
I don't want to keep like saying. So it's a plant that can keep making seed each year without, you know, just by itself, essentially. You don't need to keep putting, you're not resowing all the time. It's doing it itself.
Exactly. So it fruits year after year after year after year after year after year. So it could be anything from 3 years to 5,000 years. It will just keep going. So theoretically, a tree and many shrubs are perennials by that definition. Okay, so when we're growing food in a container, what are we typically growing? What kind of things are most common? Are they annuals, perennials, biannuals?
Lots of annuals.
Very
So
often people
salad.
are growing annuals. Now, so for an annual, essentially you need a slightly different soil to if you're growing biannual perennials, because something like 80% of all perennial plants could not exist if it wasn't for the presence of fungi. Meaning that their roots the place where they get their nutrients from, their root ball, isn't big enough to actually collect enough nutrients to keep it continuously thriving. So, so what it does is, it employs another organism. Anyone know what organism helps it out? I think, did I already say it? Maybe I said it. But what organism does it help it get the nutrients it needs? I have a feeling I already said it, but
Fungi.
okay. Imagine these are the roots of a plant. So the only place where you can get your nutrients from is around, immediately around your root, you have what's called the root zone. So this is it exudes some liquids, some exudates liquids, and through that liquid it can exchange nutrients with the soil. So the only place that it can actually get nutrients from is literally from these. So if there's a big dollop of nutrients there, this plant's not going to be able to get it. What it has to do is it has to create new roots, it has to sniff around, and then when it finally finds it, it'll then absorb it in. But at the moment, that's its root ball. That's the only place where it can get nutrients from. Imagine if there was some organism like this that was able to pick up nutrients and then come and deliver those nutrients to you. What are they, Roy?
Fungi.
Mycorrhizal fungi. So 80% of all plants, trees, shrubs, and fruiting things would not exist if it wasn't for mycorrhizal fungi. Annual plants, on the other hand, have never lived long enough to actually develop a symbiotic relationship with the mycorrhizal fungi. So So no matter how much nutrients you have or no matter how much fungi is bringing nutrients around, it cannot exchange it. So what you need is more bacterially rich soil for annual plants. All right, so that's just one thing to start to remember. So in a box, so how does nature, in a garden, how does nature continue to keep a system going? Yeah, so imagine this perennial plant. How does it continuously keep getting enough nutrients? What patterns need to be in play to actually help this happen? Okay, so how's it? Yeah, Ruth.
Decay, some kind of decay or leaf fall.
Yep, decay of what? What kind of things decay?
Stuff that lands on top of the soil, and insects, dead bodies.
Brilliant,
Wood.
exactly.
No, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, you're fading in and
Yeah.
out a little bit there, but I caught many of the keywords there.
Oh,
Perfect. So it's twigs, leaves, fruit, organic matter that falls, but other insects, insects that die, get broken down. And so basically everything eats and poops and eats and poops and eats and poops, decomposes, and that decomposition creates or makes more nutrients available to the plant. The plant then absorbs it, utilizes it, creates leaves and twigs and fruit from it, which it then drops, and then it decomposes again and goes back through the cycle. So you have this cycle, this continuous cycle of nutrients. And if it's kind of running out of nutrients in its immediate area, it's the fungi that can go and pick it up and bring it back into your system. So, so it balances it out across a whole forest or a whole forest edge. So this means that you don't need to worry so much about nutrients if you have the right plants in the right places. It's also very similar with the water cycle in terms of once your trees have established themselves, they've found their water courses, they've raised your water table, they're bringing water up through their lateral roots, they bring it into the system, they take it through all their branches and twigs into the leaves, whatever is excess, they transpire, they release, it falls, it gets released as gases, which then condense and then fall back either as rain or as dew. And then you've got this continuous cycle of moisture, which then falls back to the floor, gets absorbed, and so on and so forth. So in nature, you've got these cycles going on. But what about in a box? How could you mimic what's happening in a box if you have a closed box?
The plant's completely reliant on you to provide all of that.
Absolutely. So it can't bring in its own nutrients. It can't bring in its own water. It can't exchange. It can't employ the mycorrhizal fungi to bring nutrients in, and so on and so forth. So it's really you become a slave. You have to keep doing the work for it. Unless we can think a little bit more intelligently to think, well, is there some way that we could close this gap just a little bit? So, any ideas how, do you understand the pattern of how nature works? How it keeps these cycles going, it keeps regurgitating, moving things through, rebuilding. This is a pattern that happens in nature. How could we replicate that in a box? Which aspects of that could we replicate? Which parts could we not replicate? Now, this is where we need to start getting creative and think a little bit outside of the box, if that's not too cheesy.
You could create quite a large rain catching area for it, with a reservoir that then stores any rain that does land on it.
Okay, so you mean in the box or nearby the box?
Sort of under, or
underneath.
have a separate tank that you could do a like a gravity fed feeder to?
Now this is getting interesting. As you can see. So one system that I guess I've been doing for almost 20 odd years is where what I do is I actually store the water at the bottom in a reservoir. So effectively what I do is I create some kind of a false bottom. So however I can do that in whatever way, whether it's, you know, sometimes I might have 2 boxes, sometimes I might use, it used to be really easy, you just walk around, people would always throw away these 5-litre bottles of water, you know, just the plastic, so just cut those up and just put those in. Whatever it takes to make some kind of a fake bottom. On top of that, and I can't find my blue pen at the moment, I'm not sure where that's gone to, so I'm going to have to use green, sorry about this. On top of that, I would then put cloth, and the cloth is going on top, but it also then comes down the side. I then, and I have no idea where my blue pen has gone to, sorry, ah, is that it? Hey, there we go. I then fill this part with water and then fill this with soil. So what's going to happen here? What's going on here?
Did you say you put cloth in at the bottom, a layer of cloth or material?
So yeah, so I've got a fake bottom. I'm sitting on top of that is some cloth, but then the cloth then goes down the sides as well. So part of the cloth is now in the water.
So it's capillary action to pull it up.
Bingo. So now we have capillary action, and what initiates that capillary action?
It's like the plant trying to draw. It's like the pressure or something, isn't it? Of drawing of the holes in the soil as well, pulling up. I can't remember what it's called. There's a word for it.
So basically, when the soil starts to dry, it effectively, okay, let's not get too much into the science, but when the soil starts to dry, it sucks the water up using, as you say, capillary action. So can you hopefully what you can see here is rather than us just constantly drip feeding whether the plant wants water or not, just constantly drip feeding it water, force feeding it. Come on, eat, drink, eat, drink, eat, drink, whether you like it or not. I'm full, I can't take any more. Eat, 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 you must eat. So rather than that, it just says, hey, I'm a little bit thirsty here. Oh, look, there's some water. Thank you very much. Oh, I think I need some potassium. Oh, look, there's some potassium. Thank you very much. So rather than force feeding it, which is what most people do, is they force feed their plants, is you allow the plant to request what it needs and absorb whatever it needs. And in this way, you may not get, the plants may not grow as quickly as some other plants will, but they will be much stronger. They will be, so it's like, I don't know, what's a good analogy? I mean, you can force feed something to make it grow really, really tall and really straggly, but it's got no real backbone, and it's like, you know, a little bit of wind and poof, down it goes. It's not strong, it's not resilient, it's not tough. Whereas if you give it the opportunity to grow at its own pace and to figure its own strategies out, nature is infinitely smarter than we are. Sorry to say that, but nature has had billions of years to figure out its strategies, and it's infinitely smarter than we are. We think we know much more than nature, but you know, actually, we don't even totally 100% can't prove how photosynthesis actually even works yet. We've got some bits of the clue, but we don't even understand that, which is why we can't reproduce it ourselves chemically. So, but nature will inherently work out its best strategy for survival if we allow it to. So if you allow the plants to, rather than just pampering the plants, allow the plants to figure things out for themselves, you'll see that they're much, 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 much stronger. So one thing missing from here, or a few things that we could do to modify this. So at the moment, we've got water reservoir at the bottom. We've got, and built up by this false bottom and some kind of cloth that goes over this on top and into the soil, into the water. We've then got the soil sitting on top of that. What happens when the sun comes out? Starts blaring down on our box.
Dries.
It will dry. So what could we do?
Mulch.
Mulch. So we fill the top with some kind of mulch material. So anything, straw, hay, hay probably better than straw in a way for me, but any kind of material that basically protects the soil from the sun. The other thing that we could be doing is is put so many plants in here that they pretty much, that the leaves themselves do the mulching, that do the protection. So it's what I call living mulch. Okay, what happens when it pours and pours and pours and pours and pours with rain? What could potentially happen here?
The plants are drowning.
Yeah, this could end up filling up and you've just got a big box of water and your plants drown. So what might you do?
Put some drainage holes in, sort of halfway up.
Bingo. It's as simple as that. So just make somewhere. Typically I do it just underneath the water level of this. It's not necessary, but typically I'll do it, a centimetre or centimetre below the false bottom. That doesn't have to be, but that's where I typically do it. So I've got a decent amount of water in there without drowning the roots. So okay, a few more things that we could do. What we could then do is we could then connect several of these up. Just imagine these are much bigger. I'm running out of space on my board. So just imagine we connect several of these together. Boom, 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 boom. So we could have this reservoir at the bottom of several boxes. Then all we need to do is control the water in one. Imagine if one of these was one big, imagine if we had a huge water tank of some sort somewhere, which was connected to here. Sorry. And this had some kind of a, like a toilet ballcock in it. So as soon as the water level drops in here, the ballcock, the level of the water in this one drops, and therefore it opens the valve, puts more water in. So in other words, it's auto topping up all of the boxes. All right, so this handles water. So I've done systems like this where quite literally I built it in kind of March on top of a roof in Belgravia in near Victoria. And I came back something like September, and these boxes were just full of food. It was just overspilling. No one ever watered it. No one ever did anything. The tank was just filled with rainwater, and that just continuously fed these systems. No one ever had to do anything to manage this. But when I came back, it was just full, absolutely packed full. So this is one easy, simple thing for the water, but and to a certain extent with the mulching, and then thinking about, well, could I, instead of mainly growing perennial foods, could I get away with planting some annuals? sorry, instead of mainly growing annuals, could I get away with putting some perennials in there? So some perennials are actually not very nutrient hungry. So those ones I would absolutely put in here. What's the advantage of having those in the box?
You wouldn't even need to replant or
Yep.
seed.
Exactly. So you wouldn't need to, and you know, you only need to replace soil. Why do people keep replacing soil in their boxes? By the way, Ainsley, there is no real name for this system. I just made it up. But the closest thing to this that other people have made and created a name for is a wicking bed. But they do it quite differently to me. Their technique for actually implementing it is a little bit different. But that's the closest thing to this system. So yeah, so why do people need to keep replacing the soil?
For nutrients being used up.
Because, and in particular, because people grow the same thing, so a particular subset of nutrients are massively depleted. And therefore, and because typically people will grow single things in each box, you know, yeah, it then lends itself to pests. So instead, if we were to have a mixture of one or two perennials in each, plus a different annuals every time, just constantly changing the annuals. Now, if some of these, perennials were also, perennials were also, for example, nitrogen fixers. So they could actually be bringing nitrogen into the system continuously. Now we've got something interesting going on here because it's actually bringing nutrients. Now, if we also allowed, you know, if through the mulch that we bring in, we actually thought very carefully about the mulch we're bringing in, and that also contains, for example, potassium, it will invariably contain some nitrogen. It will have various other micronutrients in it. So if we thought very carefully about the mulch material that we bring in, perhaps that could be enough for the nutrient cycle, perhaps. The other thing that I do, so I've been experimenting since I got stuck here because of COVID. I've been actually in my garden more or less for the first time in 7 years, or doing something regularly in my garden for 7 years. It's pretty much been abandoned for a long time, apart from occasionally Sophie and Classy will come over and help take some weeds out and bramble and stuff like that. So I've made 6 boxes similar to this, but not connected because I didn't have pipes and things to connect them. So instead, what I did is I had one pipe that comes down into the middle, comes through and deposits liquid straight into the. I can pour things into it to fill this up. And what I was doing is I was in I had 4 boxes like that. I had 4 boxes with just plain, 2 boxes that were just plain, just no wicking bed system whatsoever. 4 boxes with this wicking system in, 2 of which I put biochar in, 2 of which I put no biochar in. I'll explain that in a moment, just to see the difference. And what I can tell you is the things that grew without the wicking bed struggled. Certain things really struggled in there because I don't water them hardly ever. I just let the rain do its thing and whatever. But the ones without the wicking bed struggled. The ones with the wicking beds, fantastic. And I'm still getting food from it now. I'm still eating from it, and I've never once watered it. What I do though is maybe once a month is I collect my urine in a jar, in a bottle, and normally I distribute it around the garden. But once a month I'll just pour it straight into this hole so it actually mixes in the water at the bottom. Bang, potassium, nitrogen, and small micro trace elements as well. So in doing so, it's pretty much, yeah, I mean, I've just got so much food from these boxes. It's great, you know. And even now, I've got way more greens than I can ever eat. So constantly pickling, preserving, and stuff like that. So apparently we've got 8 minutes left. So what's the plan? So if I can talk for the next hour on stuff like this. So, but I suspect we're going to call it a day. Is that right, Sophie?
So yeah, if there's more questions, we can have a bit more time. But yeah, in general, it would be nice to have a checkout before we end the call. So yeah, any pressing questions to end this from?
So there's no one way to do this. Let me tell you, I don't do recipes. I teach principles. I teach concepts. So what you make these boxes from, how you make the bottom, how you get water in there, how you let it overflow, where the overflow goes to, where you get nutrients from, you work that out. What works best for you? What materials do you have? What tools do you have? What things do you have access to? So yeah, this is how I work. I don't have recipes. I just have concepts and ideas and principles, and I put those ideas together. And yeah, it's then, which means that I can implement this in 100 different ways in 100 different places according to the 100 different tools and materials that people give me. So yeah, so while I can share some photographs of some of the things that I've done, that's typically not my way. Is to, it's not to share techniques, but it's to share ideas, and then leave it for you to work out how you're going to solve that problem. Maybe by looking at a few photographs as well. So, any questions before we do the checkout then? It's fairly straightforward. Okay, so do you want to facilitate the checkout, Sophie?
Sure, lovely. Thank you so much, Rakesh.
Okay.
Yeah, that was really nice combination, I think, with Mark looking at some of the kind of plants and variety and timing of what we could put in the boxes. And yeah, you're looking at the fundamentals of like what it actually means to grow in a box. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay, I'm just going to stop the recording. I think we were both recording that session somehow, Rakesh.